From quarterback battles to offensive line play, a new running back and a whole new secondary, Baylor's spring game showed a bit of a preview of what we'll get next fall. JJ Joe helps us break it down. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, Drake Toll here, as always, with Sikkim 365, welcoming you to Locked On Baylor. Thank you for making our podcast your first listen every day. And today, we're joined by former Baylor quarterback and now Baylor color analyst, JJ Joe. JJ, my man, football is back and then gone-ish.
Yeah, you know, Drake, there's two seasons in Texas, and I talked about this on the air. It's the fall football season, and then it's the spring football season. But hey, basketball is charging, right? I mean, we really celebrate and recognize basketball now. So we have 3 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, there's no off days with Baylor athletics because it seems like everybody's good or everybody has something going on right now. And JJ, really where I want to get started with Saturday's spring game is something that doesn't have anything to do with that actual spring game itself. As a former player and someone who's followed the game for so long, how much do spring games even matter?
It depends. Really, the game itself is usually, it's pretty matter of fact. You know what the format is. Coaches had 14 practices to evaluate you. So for the most part, there's always some battles. This year it's a quarterback. They're trying to look at corners, trying to figure out who's going to be, the safety position, stuff. So it's important in that sense because it kind of gives you the only kind of little glimpse of how the players will perform under the lights per se, because you don't get that until, of course, the season starts.
In kind of in that same vein, what is it then from your perspective that would make a spring game successful if it's just really technical?
Well, I mean, Drake, the first thing is really health. You just don't want anybody hurt in spring because, even 6 months, 5 months maybe from the season. So you want health. And then you just want to see how do your young players play? Like the receivers yesterday, Gipson played well. Several of them. Seth had a good game. I think Monaray had a good game. You want to see those guys perform under a little bit what we would call not high leverage, but kind of game-like environment. So, base schemes you're running mostly, and you just want to see how the guys perform, especially those young guys.
JJ, I'm going to have you pick out a couple of those individuals, that jumped off the page to you. But first, when it comes to position groups, obviously coming into this season, the offensive line's got 4 of those 5 guys back. Defensive line has reloaded to the point where you have like 6 names you could throw out there who are all pretty elite defenders in the Big 12. Was it one of those 2 position groups or something else that stood out to you on Saturday?
Well, being an offensive guy, Drake, I mean, I'm always looking at the offense, and I think receiver, you lose 3 receivers, you just got to find something. They have talent. I started wondering, man, after we lost RJ and then Drew and then, of course, Taekwon, I was thinking, man, but they have talent. I mean, they have young men. And I think actually Hal Presley, I think he didn't even play. So they have skill talent, but they're young. So I was watching that, wanted to see the corners behind Walcott and Milton. And then I wanted to say safety, believe it or not, because, when you lose a JT Woods, they're moving Christian Morgan around a little bit. Devin Neal will have to be relied on quite a bit, and then you'll have to have someone else back there. So, there's a few battles there that I really wanted to see and see how the people perform. But really, those receivers, really had my eye on those.
JJ, you've got a running back room for Baylor coming into this season that has 4 or 5 names kind of swirled without through Squirrel Williams or Taye McWilliams or Kyron Drones. I mean, the list kind of goes on, and even, Fleek's moving back there as well. On Saturday, it really seemed like Squirrel Williams, who I think he was in your same recruiting class, if I remember correctly. It seemed like Squirrel Williams just performed. He's been here for so long, knows the scheme so well, obviously, but he looked, to me, pretty solid.
No, he did. I mean, he really. If you remember Squirrel from, I think I messed it up on the broadcast. I think it was the 20 season when he got hurt, if I'm not mistaken. He showed flashes, and that was just a non-contact. And last year really just didn't really wasn't 100%. But I figured Squirrel would be well. It's usually that second year after the injury that you kind of get back to yourself. I thought watching Taye McWilliams last year, I mean, he played quite a bit, if you remember, because Treston was in and out a little bit. Abram missed him a little time late. I thought he was a solid back. So it was good to see those guys and see who would probably try to step up. But really in the spring game, it's tough to see that just because you're running base runs, defense knows where you're going. It's really going to be when they get in those first couple games of the season.
JJ, from the running back room to the offensive line, I've heard from different analysts so far in the spring season that your running backs, your quarterbacks really are only as good as their offensive line. Can the big guys up front block? Charlie Brewer's last season at Baylor, the offensive line struggled. So you really didn't get to see him thrive in the offense under then Larry Fedora. Now you have big bodies up front where it's 5 guys that you just have so much confidence in. How does that elevate the game of not just the running backs, but the quarterbacks too?
It's huge. I mean, Drake, if you ask me, which would you want, your skill people back or your lineman back? You always say your lineman, because your lineman can make a good line can make average to good players look one level better. So if you have good runners, they can make them like great runners. Average can look good. And when you have 4 of your 5 starters back, if I'm not mistaken, offensive lineman of the year, and oh man, how am I forgetting his name? Our tackle,
Connor Galvin. Yeah,
Connor Galvin. Thank you. I can't forget Connor. It just makes life easier. So your offensive linemen are experienced. They've seen everything. They're going to protect your quarterback, and they're going to give the runners lanes to run in. The thing that you're looking for out of those runners is who can do it, something close to what Abram Smith did. Abram just always found a way to make that one guy miss a tackle, and he would go 40 or 50. Seems like every game. So you hope you can find someone like that.
JJ, this offense and the way it's built in the wide zone, you're not going to see Baylor try to go over the top every other play. This is not your run and gun, Texas Tech a la 2017 offense. This is much more meticulous, and I think you got a glimpse of that on Saturday. When it comes to, as a quarterback yourself, needing a guy who can play that kind of field general football rather than going over the top with the ball, how does that play into this year's quarterback battle as we get into talking about those guys?
Well, the first thing is Coach Aranda is going to want your quarterback to take care of the ball. That means more than anything. Gerry did a good job. I think he had a few games in there where he kind of got a little rash with the ball, but Shapen did good with the ball as well. I don't think he threw an INT in the few games he played in. So you got to protect the ball, number one. And number two, he wants you to make sure that what he calls the throw game. I call it the throw game. He wants to make sure that you're efficient. And I think that's where the quandary is going to be, because I think really both guys bring a unique skill to the table, and it's just going to be who does Coach feel fits this team the best. So, but don't get it twisted, Drake. When you got a good running game, to keep that 8th and 9th guy out of the box, you got to have a quarterback and a receiving core that can make the big throw and make the key catch. So that has to happen.
Well, JJ, before we get deeper into that conversation, the quarterback room, offense, and even secondary I'd like to hit on, I first need to tell both you and all the folks at home about Built Bar. So, JJ, we'll be back for the folks who just saw him go away on the YouTube. For the folks on the podcast, I promise he's not going anywhere quite yet. But I got to first tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is the reason that I have kept my New Year's resolution of eating healthy, eating right. As a guy who, you've seen me, I don't necessarily go to the gym for 4 or 5 hours a day like some of my friends do. So instead, I want to be able to, have that gym-like nutritional routine without, eating constantly. So I go to Built Bar because it has, in general, 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, compared to a candy bar with 240 calories. You're looking at 30 grams of sugar as well. It's a 26 gram sugar difference. Built.com, you go down to the macros chart, you'll be blown away. Like high protein, this stuff tastes great too. It's like a candy bar with white chocolate cookies and cream being the flavor of this month. Built Bar right now. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED 15 for 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, JJ, I hope you had a good nap. It's a quick one, right? But I hope you enjoyed it. And looking at, from a quarterback standpoint too, because this is where I really want to see how the secondary thrives, right? Does your secondary scare an opposing quarterback? When you look at Baylor secondary, the youth, the question marks here and there from safety to corner, what did you see on set? Is this the early makings of a secondary that's going to be solid in the Big 12, or something that could be exposed like it was at times last year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing I was happy about when Al Walcott came back, and then of course Mark Milton, we knew we had him. So you want to have a couple veteran corners. I like those young guys. I think Tevin Williams III, and I think it's AJ. What is AJ's? AJ McCarty, number 19. Those young guys I think are good. So they're gonna have some development. I'm really scared. I really was concerned when they said they would probably move Christian down a little bit, say from the safety position. Losing two deep safeties always scares me, Drake, because, I mean, a solid defense, you got to have guys back there to clean up a lot of stuff. The last few years when Baylor was good in 19, they had Chris Miller, and I think it was Graylin, cleaned up a lot of messes. And then last year, Christian Morgan and JT Woods, and then some Devin Neal cleaned up a lot of messes. So I really would like Christian to kind of stay back there, but I understand. So I'm looking at those safeties more so than those corners, because I think we'll have a good pass rush, and those guys up front will go get the quarterback.
JJ, the linebacking core standpoint, I've realized too, under Dave Aranda, most folks have the offense under a microscope for the spring game. The defense is just going to come with it, right? There's so much trust in what Coach Aranda has put out there. From a linebacker standpoint too, it seems like the box right now for Baylor is about as elite as I've seen here in a bit. And Baylor's known in the last 10 years, especially for great linebackers, but it looks like this core is ready to step up, even without a guy like Jalen Petrie who could shift into the box, or a guy like Terrell Bernard. Granted, replacing those pieces is not easy, but it seems like Baylor's in a good place to do so.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they have 7 guys back. Then they got 2 really good transfers. A Jackson player played quite a bit yesterday. Different body type. I mean, he's different, but he's really quick, different from Ika. And then, of course, Dylan Doyle is sitting there, and then you come in and you got Matt Jones, who didn't even play yesterday, who's I think is a significant talent for this team. I'm hoping he gets back healthy. And I'm not even talking about the transfer we just got from LSU. Yeah. Man, that guy's NFL talent. So the linebacker room is thick, Drake. I don't think they'll have any issues there. But, hey, look, you got to replace production. I mean, I kind of count, Jalen Petrie as a box player. He's a box player. You got Terrell Bernard, who, of course, definitely is a box player. And they have the talent. I think Matt will come back. Our transfer play well. But, man, those guys are highly productive. So it'll be interesting to see now that, these linebackers be relied on outside of Dylan, a few of them for the first time in their career for 60 snaps or 55 snaps. Can they produce at the level that Terrell did and Jalen Petrie did? So I'm interested to see. Got a lot of talent.
JJ, I know that I'm bouncing around here a lot from different positions and both sides of football. This interview, this whole podcast segment is kind of like the spring game, right? You're just that's why I've modeled it this way, just bouncing from position to position, because you see those flashes in the game as we did on Saturday. One of those guys who got significant playing time being Kyron Drones. And JJ, it's tough in the age of college football today to be a good young player, because somebody's usually transferring into your spot, or you have a guy that's older ahead of you. And the future is really now, in that Blake Shapen has still so much eligibility left. Same thing for Gerry Bohanon, who's here this year. And I'm sure he could just say the words COVID year and come back next year. When you're a star in waiting, like Kyron Drones, I mean, what's your message to a guy like that to keep him in Waco?
I tell you, it's, Drake, there's no answers to new age. I don't think any of us know. And I'd be honest with you. I mean, with the young men, I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. I think it's just what's right for you and your family, right? Drake, this is big business. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but college football is big business. It's been this way for years, after I left, really. So really what you have to say to Kyron is, hey, look, where do you think you'll be developed the best? You don't want to go somewhere and bounce around and not get developed. And you look up, your eligibility is gone and you're transferring that last year, right? So where do you think you'll be developed the best? And then where eventually do you think they'll give you an honest opportunity? So whether that opportunity is 2 years or 3 years or maybe even 1, I look at, Jalen Hurts, what he did. He stayed at Alabama, stayed there, came in, did just a little bit. Then he transferred out, had a fantastic year, and was drafted probably about the highest he could be drafted, the first pick, I think, of the second round. So Drones is a major talent, but I think if most people watched and if he's honest, he needs a little bit more development. He's not there yet, and that's okay. I mean, he's everybody needs a little development.
Yeah, certainly. And I think star in the making is a great way to put it, because I see there's so much potential for Drones and what he could do with the Baylor offense, especially under Jeff Grimes. So, JJ, all kind of funneling down to this. When it comes to, they could be guys that surprised you or just names that you are ready to see play on Saturday. Who are the 2-3 guys that stood out to you that are going to be forces of nature this coming fall?
Hey, that's a good question. I really want to see, and I'm going to start defense. I really want to see Matt Jones full time.
Yeah.
Last year they had to manage him a little bit because he was a young player. I think he's a little edgy. I like to call him an edgy type player, but his just talent is unquestioned. I think if you look at him, some of the plays he made, I really want to see him. And I hate that I didn't get to see him this spring. I really want to see what Snacks, what Lorando Johnson does. He's different from Petrie. But he played quite a bit last year when he had to come in and did a really good job. So I'm really interested to see how he does. It's funny. I'm not even going to talk about the front because I think I may have talked about that in prior years because I really have high expectations, right?
Yeah.
That those guys coming back, will play great football. I want to see TJ Franklin take that next step. And I know there's others, but I think those guys are ready. So really from the defensive standpoint, that's kind of what I was looking at. And I hope to, see in the fall when they come back. Offensively, it's all about really for me, the wideouts. I think somebody has to develop to make sure that we don't see what Oklahoma State did to us. What Oklahoma State did to us is they had some talent, of course, but they stacked it on us. They were aggressive. They played downhill, didn't give our quarterback a lot of time. We hit one, I think, and then we were limited, and our run game was limited. The second time we played Oklahoma State, the math changed on them. I kept saying this on air. The math has changed, and they have no solution until Blake got hurt. So I want to see those receivers develop. So, Javon Gipson, I really liked him. I thought he did well. Is it Josh Cameron or Jordan Cameron? Josh Cameron, 34.
Yeah, Jordan Cameron. Yeah.
Josh Cameron, 6'2", 210. Man, he surprised me a little bit. He had a couple of, but he's a nice body, and I didn't know him, but prior to this spring. So interested in seeing him, and like I say, Hal Presley, didn't get to see him. So really want to see these receivers and how they develop. And of course, Monaray Baldwin, we know the speed, but I tell you on that deep ball, man, I'm going to tell you, it's hard to do what he did. And Bonner did the same thing with it. You're running full tilt. Full tilt.
Yeah.
And you get that ball and snatch it out of there. That is not easy. And he did it. He and Bonner did it. So a lot of talent. Just want to see if they can develop that consistency.
Man, that was the best. When CJ Rogers just unloads it, and the entire stands collectively go, CJ, who? What did? Ho! It's just launched that sucker, man.
Yeah. I looked at the game again because I said, hey, man, he's holding it too long. That's the first thing I thought in my head, like, let it go. So you saw Bonner coming, and he threw that thing about 57, 58 yards in the air. Now, he had a little wind behind him, but still, that took a little stroke. So I thought he was out. He had been outrun. That was too far, but he did a good job.
When your fourth string quarterback is uncorking a ball like that, you're probably in a good spot. You're probably in a pretty good spot. And I think Baylor's offense certainly is this coming year. So JJ, before we get you out of here, and I know, man, it's the spring game. It could have gone great and Baylor goes 4-8 next year. It could go terrible and Baylor goes 15-0. So what you've seen though, kind of the early inklings going into next season, what is the ceiling to you for this Baylor football team as it sits right now, April 25th?
I think the sky's the limit. And I'm not just saying because I'm a Baylor fan. If you watch them, the first thing I start with is, you inside out, you're inside, your middle, your line. If your linemen are good and solid, you're going to be in any ball game. And then you start looking, hey, up the middle to my Mike linebacker, my quarterbacks. Then I go to my safeties, and that's why I talk about safeties. And then I start working my way out. But up front, those guys can compete with anybody they'll play. Probably save for some, team in the SEC that's got 6 top 5 draft choices or something. Yeah. They can play with anybody. So I think they can repeat as champs. I don't see why they couldn't, but a few pieces have to fall in place, including help, including some development on the edge. But man, they'll have the defense that can keep them in any ball game. And I'm excited to see it. Trust me, I am.
What's the thing about offense winning games and defense does what?
Win championships, man. It does.
Defense wins championships.
Yeah, you got to have the D. An offense is going to put you in a position to win games and is going to win you some games. But ultimately, as we saw and I think that was in December in Arlington, somebody's got to make a play. And that defense made several plays.
The Mick play, if you will. Good stuff.
There you go.
I love it. JJ, man, thanks so much for joining the show today and talking Baylor football.
Hey, man. Hey, thanks for having me, Drake.
All right. Once again, that was JJ Joe, former Baylor quarterback and now Baylor color analyst. Good stuff from JJ talking offense, defense, spring game, football, the general stuff. I want to tell you folks too about betonline.net right now before we get into a conversation about Baylor's newest bear on the basketball floor and what Lohner is going to add to this program. Betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Major League Baseball season's going on. If you think like, hey, I bet the Texas Rangers are about to get hot. They're about to win 7 or 8 games in a row. You can make a bet on that. You can put, money responsibly. BetOnline.net, if you're over 21, by the way. BetOnline.net is your place for all things sports betting. It's got a live casino, esports as well, live betting too for these games as well. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action at BetOnline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, big news over the weekend as I'm going to go ahead and thank you again for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Big news over the weekend is Caleb Lohner has committed to Baylor men's basketball from BYU. So Lohner chose the Bears over teams like Utah and UCLA. So he said yes to Scott Drew over Mick Cronin at UCLA, liked the fit at Baylor. And he's a guy who was successful even out of high school. 4-star prospect, had an offer from Baylor in 2020. He's a Dallas guy. Here's some insider baseball or basketball, if you will. My roommate, who is probably in the same vicinity of where I am recording right now, actually was on his same AAU team in Dallas, said the dude was a stud. So don't take it from me. Take it from my roommate who played AAU ball with Caleb Lohner that he's legit. He played 24 minutes a game last season at BYU, averaging 7 points and 6.4 rebounds. That was his sophomore season, his second year at BYU. His first year at BYU, the same year that Baylor won the national championship, by the way. 6'8", 240-pound forward. Played a little less, so still had 7 points, 7 rebounds. So he's got consistency, one of the best rebounders in the country, too. So his rebound rate per minute is awesome. 24 minutes per game, 6.4 rebounds. The guy's a really committed defender who's also got a nose for the basketball when it comes to pulling it down off the rim. So Caleb Lohner is going to bring that to the Baylor team. And now you have the question too. So, and I mentioned he had, really good success rebounding. I also want to throw out there that he shot 33% from 3 his freshman year, 21% last year, but played most of the season with a fractured thumb and was asked to put on weight to play inside for BYU. So struggled a little bit more on the outside. And now coming to Baylor, you have the leeway to be a 3. And that's a big thing right now for Baylor next season. Where does Caleb Lohner fit into what Scott Drew wants to do with next year's team? Because we've mentioned the starting 5 should be both Keontae George, Adam Flagler at true guard spots, and then you move LJ Cryer into a smaller 3 role, then Jalen Bridges at 4, and your 5 very obviously Flo Thamba. I can guarantee you right now, Flo Thamba is going to start, Adam Flagler, they're going to start, Jalen Bridges is going to start, because you need size from those Jalen Bridges and Flo Thamba, and Adam Flagler is Adam Flagler. Then it becomes a conversation. You now have Caleb Lohner, you have Keontae George, and you have LJ Cryer. There are 2 starting spots left. That's 3 guys. Who of those guys start? If you want a big lineup, I'm talking get me ready to play in the Big Ten. Let's go be Matt Painter in Purdue. You go Caleb Lohner at the 3 at 6'8", 240 pounds, which I'm sure he'll cut down, become more of a shooter and a guy who's effective offensively. But you ask him as a junior to be your 3. Then you have your 4 as Jalen Bridges, your 5, Flo Thamba. Your 2 then would probably still be Adam Flagler, and I'd say your 1 is going to end up being Keontae George with LJ Cryer coming off the bench. Do I think that's what's most ideal for next year's team? No, I don't. I just don't believe having LJ Cryer on the bench to start any basketball game is a bad idea. I think Lohner can be really clutch coming off the bench pretty quickly. You've also got guys like Dale Bonner who are going to be contributors. Matthew Meyer, yes, has declared for the NBA draft, but also hasn't signed an agent, so he can still come back. But right now, I do think Adam Flagler returns. I think Adam Flagler returns. That's where I'm putting all my marbles in on that. Matthew Meyer, I don't know. I don't know. Probably not, especially with the pickup of Caleb Lohner. It's not going to be advantageous for Matthew Mayer to probably come back next season because now his minutes are cut into by a guy in Lohner who I think you need to play. He's ready to come to Baylor, be a contributor as a junior. And I trust Scott Drew a lot more than I trust guys like Mark Pope over at BYU for developing a player. Not to say that BYU's staff is doing anything wrong or they're not great, but they're not Scott Drew. They're not formerly Jerome Tang. They're not, Alvin Brooks III, John Jacobs. Those guys, I have a lot of trust in getting Caleb Lohner on the floor and ready. And for that, I don't believe that Matthew Mayer would be in his best interest to come back and play next season for the Bears. So Adam Flagler, I think, comes back. And if he does, let's say wild hypothetical, Adam Flagler doesn't come back. Now you have Keontae George, LJ Cryer, Caleb Lohner, Jalen Bridges, Flo Thamba. That's your starting five. I think that starting five with the hopes of Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua coming back in early mid-January, which no one's given that timeline. I'm just kind of spitballing. But you have that starting five with Dale Bonner coming off the bench. You're still going to see some of Jordan Turner. You're going to see pieces like Zach Loveday, Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua coming back to all that rounded out and put together. I think you're building then a really solid team if Flagler stays gone. Now, if Flagler and Mayer come back, let me just pitch a hypothetical to you really quick. Keontae George, LJ Cryer, Adam Flagler, Matthew Mayer, Caleb Lohner, what did I get? I got Lohner, Flo Thamba, Jalen Bridges. That's 7, right? Cryer, Flagler. I don't know. I lost count. That's 7 guys who are legit and would be powerhouse at Baylor. I don't know how well they would glue or mesh, but I can tell you this, the addition of Caleb Lohner does nothing but help Baylor. I do believe this team next year with this size, question now answered, is going to be so much better than they would have been had they not gotten a Jalen Bridges or a Caleb Lohner. So a lot of confidence in that. What are the odds Miro Little finds a way to come to Baylor early? Then you add a true point guard piece because you still don't have that on the team. But looking back, Davion Mitchell, Jared Butler, Maceo Teague, that was the one thing that a lot of folks said would be the kryptonite if they were to lose, is they didn't have one true point guard. Not one of those guys is someone that I say I'd rather have you facilitating than scoring because they're all 3 really good scorers. And granted, there are pure point guards who are score-first guys. But when I think a point guard at Baylor under Scott Drew, I think, we need to pass the basketball, be successful. So having Miro Little in that mix would be great. I think that's out of the question. But right now you add Caleb Lohner into a culture of success, a culture of joy, as he kind of alluded to when he decided to transfer out of BYU. And I think the starting lineup next year will still be Keontae George, Adam Flagler, LJ Cryer, Jalen Bridges, Flo Thamba. But now you have Caleb Lohner coming in pretty quick off the bench. Hey, thank you again. You that's listening, thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every week. Really. Like, this is such a fun thing to do, but it doesn't happen without you. Thank you for making it your first listen every week. Make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft with Eric Crocker. And, I also have to say this. Big announcement. For the first time ever, Locked On is hosting live coverage of the NFL Draft from their studio in Dallas with pick-by-pick analysis from the local team experts and draft gurus. Tune in all 3 days as our draft team guides you through every pick and every trade in real time. Starts Thursday, April 28th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Available on Locked On NFL on YouTube and the Odyssey app and wherever you get your podcasts. Come back tomorrow, because the shows are only going to get more spring football oriented, talking about last week's green and gold game. Tomorrow will be no different as we recap continually Baylor's performance as the green team got a win over the gold 28-16. Thanks for listening again. As always, this has been, always will be Locked On Baylor.